why the politicians hate money that's backed by gold and silver. They cannot manipulate it. So their challenge was, how can we artificially depress the interest rates below the natural level that's produced in the free market? And the solution was, they said, the nation needed what was called a flexible currency. They said this is what industry needed to prosper, a flexible currency. You still hear that phrase today, the virtues of a flexible currency. Well, what is a flexible currency? You need a dictionary. Well, it's not paper money that folds. What that means is money created out of nothing. That's what a flexible currency is. See, the trick is not particularly hard to figure out here. If you are creating money out of nothing, you don't have to charge an awful lot of interest on it to show a profit. See, it's as simple as that. So, with a flexible currency, now they have a lever on it. And they can jack the interest rates down, 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 so that it's attractive, and they're still making plenty of profit on it because it didn't cost them anything. And they have reversed the trend toward private capital formation. And the third objective that they spoke about in those days was how to pass on the inevitable losses within the banking system, to pass those losses on to the taxpayer in the name of protecting the people. Now, let's give the Federal Reserve System another report card with these objectives in mind and see how well it has done. Did they keep control over the banking system and the monetary system in New York? And yes, they did. Anyone who knows how the markets function, it has always remained in New York. In fact, it's even more so now in New York than it was then. Yes, there are plenty of large banks in the nation, in the South and in the West, but these are small compared to those giants that are in New York, in fact, that are astride the world, with offices in Peking and Moscow and Africa, everywhere in the world. The giants are in New York, and they have been running the show all of these years. A few years ago, there was a book that appeared on the market called Secrets of the Temple, written by William Grider and published by Simon & Schuster. It was a bestseller, and it was advertised as a scathing attack against the Federal Reserve System. Well, when I heard that, I could hardly believe my eyes and my ears. A scathing attack against the Federal Reserve System, published by Simon & Schuster? Now, this is one of the biggies. I thought to myself, well, a miracle has happened. I guess I don't have to finish my book because it's done. Somebody did it. So I ran down and I got a copy of the book and I went through it, and I was amazed at what I found on 2 points. First of all, I was amazed because Grider had his history very well done indeed. It was accurate. I didn't expect that. I thought it might be a whitewash of some kind. But it wasn't. It was very good. I knew about this because I was right then in the process of researching it, and Grider had it. And on this point of the concentration of power in New York, I'd like to read to you just a couple of sentences from his best-selling book. He's talking about 1913 here, and he said, at the time, the conventional wisdom in Congress was that the government institution would finally harness the money trust, disarm its powers, and establish broad democratic control over money and credit. The results were nearly the opposite. The money reforms enacted in 1913, in fact, helped to preserve the status quo, to stabilize the old order. Money center bankers would not only gain dominance over the new central bank, but would also enjoy new insulation against instability and their own decline. Once the Fed was in operation, the steady diffusion of financial power halted. Wall Street maintained its dominant position and even enhanced it. Which is true. Now, the second thing that amazed me about his book was his conclusion. After demonstrating that the Federal Reserve System had always acted against the public interest, and that it was designed to do that from the beginning, what do you suppose his conclusion was regarding what we should do about it? Abolish the Fed? No, nothing that extreme. Well, how about a major overhaul? No, no, not necessary. He said, you see, folks, it's all so complicated. But we're learning as we go, and we're getting better at it. Relax, everything's under control. All we need now are wiser men. Well, there you have an interesting situation. You see, that's the kind of powder puff solution that it takes to be published by Simon & Schuster or any of the other major publishing houses which are firmly locked into the financial web of the money trust in Wall Street. There's no way in the world that these major media outlets are going to allow anybody to come up with a real solution to the problem. Now, I need to digress here just for a second because we have a lot to learn from this. Not just in the field of the Federal Reserve System, but in many other areas of concern to our nation in these critical days ahead. It's not enough just to point with alarm. It's not enough just to say, well, this is historically true, and it's not enough to lead the charge if you don't lead it anywhere. See, these people don't care how much you expose their scams or their conspiracies or their plots if you have no solution. If your only solution is, well, now I told you about it, now just vote Republican, you know? If that's it, nothing's going to happen, is it? Till we look behind party labels. In other words, wiser men, whatever that means. This is controlled opposition, ladies and gentlemen, and it's something that's been going on for a long time. These people are smart enough. Remember, they sold this Federal Reserve System in the face of opposition, and they did it by deception. They're smart enough to control their own opposition or to create their own opposition if necessary, so they can lead it nowhere. I'll just leave that thought with you because it's something we need to be very aware of in the critical days ahead. Let's get back to the Federal Reserve. It gets an A on its report card for objective number 1, which is to maintain control over the money markets in New York. Did they reverse the trend toward private capital formation? Boy, did they ever. With interest rates brought down periodically to such attractive levels, individuals and corporations have been enticed away from saving their own money and going to the bank. You'd be a fool not to get that money at those low interest rates. Of course, then the economy contracts and things go a little sour now and then, and the fruit falls from the tree, and they pick it up. They get all your marbles. They get all your assets, your houses, your cars, your factories, your stocks, and your bonds. That's one of the reasons we've had so many bankruptcies in the decades past. Even those companies today which are hanging in there by the skin of their teeth because it's all they can do to make payments to service their debt to the banks. Notice that many of those companies are now sending more money to the banks as interest on their loans than they send to their stockholders as dividends on their stocks. Think about that. The banks which created the money out of nothing, no effort at all, no risk really of anything, are making more money out of these giant industries than the people who worked for the money, sacrificed, saved the money, invested it, and risked it. And yet the money is going to the banks. Yes, the Federal Reserve System, in fact, gets an A on its report card for reversing the trend toward private capital formation, and they did it with a flexible currency, just as they had planned to do it. And what about the third objective, which was to pass the losses on to the taxpayers in the name of protecting the people? That is something which I call in my book Operation Bailout, the game called bailout. You may have noticed every time a large bank gets into trouble, not the small banks, they're dispensable. The large banks, when they get into trouble, they're going to be bailed out by the government, which means by your tax dollars and mine, in the name of protecting the people. It doesn't make any difference if there's if it's a private corporation or a city municipality or a third world country. Whoever has borrowed megabucks from these banks and now can't service their debt anymore. They have trouble making those interest payments, which is